It is July 2nd, 1863. Dan Sickles will disobey orders and he'll end up losing a leg. It is the 160th anniversary to the Battle of Gettysburg special here at Weekend Travels. It is July 2nd, 1863. Dan Sickles will disobey the orders of Meade and he'll move his troops down here to the peach orchard. By 5 p.m., battle has started and there'll be heavy loss and heavy casualties. Let's see what Gettysburg has to offer here on July 2nd, 2023. July 2nd, 1863. The lines of the Battle of Gettysburg, now in its second day, were drawn. The Confederate and Union armies faces each other a mile apart. Dan Sickles disobeyed orders of Meade and will move his army to the peach orchard where fighting broke out and will eventually make its way to Devil's Den and then back to Little Round Top. But on this day, July 2nd, 2023, it's the 160th anniversary, and you can hear the Confederate bugler sounding his horn in remembrance to those who fell and died here. On the other side of Devil's Den, a different kind of remembrance was taking place, a wheat-laying ceremony at the 62nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment Monument.
Barlow's Knoll, 17th Connecticut, 62nd Pennsylvania here. My homeboys, the 64th New York, we're back up there on the ridge. So we come here to commemorate, to memorialize, to dedicate to those men who fought here, looking for our ancestors. You're keeping it alive, those terms of reference with the past. I look at the youngsters here. And you know, 30 years in the Army, young man. What's your name? You, black shirt.
Dean.
Say it louder, son.
Dean. 30 years in the Army, son. I didn't fight at Gettysburg. You know that, right? Okay. See? There's others that don't. The questions from the public betray their ignorance of the past, oftentimes. How long did it take the two armies to march to Gettysburg from Valley Forge? A question. Not from a child, from an adult. Not once, but twice. Over 25 years that question was asked.
Not for me, son.
Again, terms of reference with the past, you see. He's going to learn. Maybe he already knows it. But we've got to keep it alive. Those terms of reference with our past. Last month, oh no, wait a minute, 2 months ago, it's July, isn't it? July 1st. Back in May, I was down in Alabama with a group. I moderated a panel of Vietnam veterans, those who got involved in the first major battle with the North Vietnamese Army in November 1965. LZ X-Ray, LZ Albany. Their story commemorated in the book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. in the movie of the same name. 6 of those survivors are on my panel to give public presentations about the true story of the Vietnam War. While we were in Alabama, we got invited to go to Georgia, to Fort Benning, as distinguished guests at the name changing ceremony of Fort Benning to Fort Moore. Hal Moore, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, commanded 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry in that battle in theIen Rang Valley, of which these men were part of that battalion. So we were pleased, if there's going to be a name change from Fort Benning, Henry Benning, Confederate general, his troops just up the road here, if there's going to be a name change, who would they change the name to? We were pleased to see that it would be Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore and his wife Julie together. It's now Fort Moore. But my oldest son's birth certificate will always say he was born at Fort Benning, Georgia. They can't take that away from us. So you being here is important to establish, to continue to maintain the terms of reference with the past. And I commend you for it. And I encourage you, with the babe in your arms, to continue to do it as long as you can. Thank you.
In keeping with keeping this personal, at this time we're going to have several of the descendants of men who served in this unit come forward, okay, to prove that the Lord does have a sense of humor. Our granddaughter Chloe, we actually discovered through her grandmother on her other side, is descendant of John A. Walker, who was killed here on So Chloe, if you would. John. Are there any other descendants of guys here? Okay, I wanted to make sure I don't leave anybody out. I'm going to start with Chloe. These folks are going to read the names of the 22 men who were killed in the wheat field on July 2nd, the 62nd Regiment.
Major William G. Lowry, Private James Ted Hope, Company A, Private Thomas R. Woods, Company A, Corporal William H. Myers, Company C, Private John Long, Company D, and Private John A. Walker, Company D.
Private William H. Dunn, Company F. Private Samuel M. Little, Company F. Private Robert Otterson, Company F. Sergeant William H. Schaefer, Company F. First Lieutenant Scott McDowell, Company G. Private Richard Louderman, Company H. Captain Edwin Little, Company I. And Corporal Thomas H. Budlong, Company I.
Private William Kelly, Company I. Private William Orr, Company I. First Sergeant Color Sergeant Isaac Osborne, Company I. Second Lieutenant Josiah Mack, Company K. Private John Matter, Company L. Private George McIntosh, Company L. And Private Henry C. Haffel, Company L.
In studying and researching and writing history of the American Civil War, we're blessed with evidence of the past in terms of the record keeping of the official reports, but also of the work done by the Army's medical department. The Army's medical department tells us this about wounded Civil War soldiers. 1 of every 7 wounded Civil War soldiers will die within 3 weeks of their being wounded, either from the wound itself or other calamities that will befall because of the wound. The following men of the 62nd PVI will also die after having been wounded. Private Samuel Dermott, Company C. Corporal James S. McKinley, Company E. Private Joseph Sharon, Company F. Private Cyrus Plummer, Company H. Private Charles Gibbs, Company K. Second Lieutenant Patrick Morris, Company M.
Matt, John, you want to stick around here, Chloe? At this moment, we call this a wreath laying ceremony, but given the fact that this battle took place in what was over 20 acres of ripe for harvest wheat, we choose to use a sheaf of wheat in honor of these men. It also has its Christian symbolism, which means a lot to us. So at this time, we're going to place the wheat at the monument. Up in it. Shoulder on. Somebody, present on. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the remembrance portion of this ceremony. I'd like you to stick around just another couple minutes. As a living history regiment, we're human. We suffer losses too. A year and a half ago, we lost a very dear corporal in our unit. We have not replaced him. Today we're going to do that. Private Bowser. And that concludes our service. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we are here.
We leave the wheat field and head over to our next stop, Spangler's Spring, already have an encampment and a firing demonstration.
Fouls right, mark. Fouls right, mark. Right wheel, mark. Halt. Forward, mark. Company, halt. Quarter arm.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to the Spangler Springs Colts Hill area of Gettysburg National Military Park. And as the ranger said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about infantry tactics at the time of the Civil War and a little bit about the weaponry. And you know, you look at this formation where you got guys standing rank upon rank, shoulder to shoulder. It doesn't look very bright to 21st century eyes. But one of the things you have to understand is you're in a period of major changes in small arms technology. Prior to the American Civil War, most wars were fought by armies primarily equipped with smoothbore muskets. It's essentially an elongated shotgun. It'll throw the round 1,000 yards, but you can only control aim out to about 100 yards. Now, there were rifles used in earlier conflicts, but they used a round ball that you wrapped in a patch, had to force into the landing grooves of the weapon, and while it gave you 300 or 400 yards of accurate firepower, it took you 3 times longer to load it than it did a smoothbore musket. The big changes going on in Europe have with design changes to the ammunition that allows you to use a rifle ball, not really a ball, and load a rifle musket as quickly as you can load a regular smoothbore. The most well-known is the Minet ball, or as pronounced in this country, mini ball, which is an essentially elongated bullet, but it's cupped out in the back, if you've ever seen a mini ball. The ball is slightly smaller than the bore of the weapon, so when that sits on top of the powder charge blows into that hollow space, puts the thin lead walls into the rifling, and imparts spin, and you now have a weapon with, again, accuracy out to about 300-400 yards. Yeah, the round flies farther than that, but 300 to 400 yards, and you can fire it as fast as a smoothbore musket. That type of weapon was introduced into the United States Army only in 1855, 6 years before the Civil War. And while they did make some changes and alterations in the tactics, basically it was like trying to move you through the killing zone faster. They speeded things up, made maneuvers more efficient. But and they were experimenting with trying to do some other things, but once the Civil War starts, you go from a regular army of about 15,000 enlisted men and officers to huge numbers of volunteers mobilized on both sides, even early on, in excess of 500,000 men, and we're like, okay, we're going to stick with the tried and true, no more experimentation. We're going to do the line infantry tactics, and that's what we're going to work with. Hence why you get a formation like this. Now, we're working with a very small group, even smaller than the smallest companies that fought here at Gettysburg, because some of those companies only had 18, 19 men. But what we're going to do is demonstrate different types of fire. The first type of fire we're going to demonstrate is, we're going to be generous, call it fire by company, where all the folks fire at once, but it can be done with companies, battalions, regiments, and on rare occasions, whole brigades, where they fire at once, and when you usually do that, you're using it against the enemy that's out there at maximum range, 300-400 yards, or as often happened on this field, which has got a lot of broken up ground, trees and such, You come upon the enemy and you want to hit them with the maximum force as quickly as you can to try to inflict as much damage. So we will now demonstrate that. Fire by company. Company, ready. Aim. Fire. Move. Now the problem with this sort of fire is, for whatever size unit fired, for about the next 20 or 30 seconds, you can't produce any fire on that part of the line. So the manual gave you different ways that officers could alternate their fire. The first we're going to demonstrate is fire by rank. You have a front rank, you have a rear rank. And by altering the fire of the ranks, you can keep about 50% of your firepower in reserve to deal with something that may change in the tactical situation. Fire by rank, rear rank, aim, fire, move. We used to move quicker when we were younger. Front rank, aim, fire, move. Now, even though we're only firing with like 6 men, you sort of see the kind of noise this can make. Imagine if you have hundreds of men firing. Or in some cases, thousands, plus all the other noises of the battlefield. So, the primary way of giving orders on a battlefield is the good old Mark I human voice, which can get lost in all that chaos. So if you end up in a position where you're essentially in a stand-up fight against the enemy and you're not going to be moving but just firing for a bit, the command that would be given would be fire by file, commence firing. You have the 2 ranks, front and rear, but the 2 men that stand one behind another are a file. And at the command fire by file, the right file in each company, once they get ordered to commence firing, they fire. Then the next file and the next file on down the line, and the men continue to load and fire at will, keeping up a continual roll of fire along the front until given the command to cease fire. Company, fire by file, commence firing. It's somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds. So if this was the size of a normal company here for both sides, instead of having 6 men, you'd have about 5 times this number of men. So by the time you get down to the left end of the line, the guys on the right end have already reloaded and started firing. All right, well, when the officer gives the command to cease firing, wherever you're at in the loading procedure, you complete loading, Bring your weapon to the shoulder so that your officer knows that you're loaded. And then you can either get another command of fire or a command of movement. After we have loaded the weapons again, we're going to demonstrate again that single mass fire where everyone fires at once. Fire by company. Company, ready.
Oh, they're gonna shoot one more time.
Aim. Fire. Prime. The sergeant is just given the command to prime. Basically, you're going to put a percussion cap on. We're going to check to see that all the weapons are clear and safe to handle. But the percussion cap is an often overlooked technological change when we're talking about rifling and greater range. Before the American Civil War and a couple of smaller wars in Europe, what's the primary way that weapons are ignited? What method?
Flintlock.
Flintlock. Flintlocks are notoriously unreliable, particularly in certain weather conditions like today. But the British Army, before they converted from flintlocks to percussion, did testing both in Great Britain and India to see what the real difference was before we invest in this new technology. Under average weather conditions, with flintlock ignition in both places, the misfire rate was just short of 400 rounds per 1,000. With percussion ignition, it was slightly over 4 misfires per 1,000. So in addition to the fact that you've got people fighting primarily with weapons with longer range, you now have a whole lot more lead flying downfield than you've seen in earlier conflicts. Now we've talked about the rifle musket and what the rifle can do. What's the infantryman's other primary weapon?
Bayonet.
For those of you who've done a lot of reading, there's a lot of reading about bayonet attacks, bayonet assault, but in all honesty, there are relatively few edged weapon injuries. If you look through the medical logs of the Army of the Potomac, which are pretty good, because the bayonet is essentially a weapon of psychological shock more than physical shock. If you see a bayonet assault coming at you and you're shooting into it, guys are dropping, they're filling in the ranks, and they keep coming, some little bell goes off in the back of your head that this may not be something you want to deal with. Now, if you have a real physical obstacle, such as the breastworks and some of the stone walls here on Culp's Hill, you're more likely to stand and fight. But even if you have some of the low stone walls that you see on any number of places on this battlefield, it provides enough of a psychological barrier that people will stand and fight better and actually face a bayonet assault. Well, what we're going to do for you today in a much compressed box and on a much, much smaller scale is get to see how a bayonet assault works from the business end.
Double quick, march. Now, charge, bayonet!
So again,
Dress right.
much smaller scale, but if you see, hundreds, if not thousands of men coming at you like that, who just advance, they pick up speed, and then when they get close, down come the bayonets. Yeah, a lot of times the people taking that, they just break. Well, that essentially concludes our demonstration here in the demonstration area with the weapons. We will be going back into our camp area where, yes, a lot of us did sleep out here in the rain last night. Please feel free to come back into the camp area, ask any questions. We'll be happy and try to answer them. If you have specific questions you would like to ask me, I'll stay here for a bit. But thank you for your time and attention this morning, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day here at Gettysburg National Military Park. Thank you.
With all the excitement on the battlefield, we head back into town to check out the various encampments that are set up, like this one, at Alumni Park, offering free talks by Civil War generals. Across the street is the historic Rupp House, where they have a small encampment set up on their property, including the Ladies for the Union, where they showcase different things including sewing with a demonstration. As I leave, I make a quick stop at one of my favorite stores before heading back to my car.
So, I go to Gettysburg Emporium. I come out with a vest, consignment vest. Oh boy, was not expecting to buy another vest, but I got a vest.
We hopped back into the car and stopped at our last location before getting food, the Gettysburg Heritage Center, where not only did they have a Confederate encampment, but someone teaching us about more Civil War medicine, but this time from the Confederate perspective.
Odds are the only thing you may have ever had that would cause euphoria would be Daddy's moonshine, if you're lucky enough to get it. Probably weren't that lucky. So you've never had anything that would cause you to suddenly feel good, and now the doctor has given you opium pills.
Right.
The doctor would say, look, this will probably stop it in 2 or 3 days, and he'll give you a dozen. And, he'd reach in here, write his prescription, and I'd take one a day, stick them in the envelope. They look just like these beautiful candy-colored peanuts there. He would put 12 of them in there, and he would say, after the diarrhea has stopped, throw these away, they're very highly addictive. Okay, doc. He takes it the first time, and the diarrhea hasn't gone away, but he feels really good. And this keeps feeling good for several days. The diarrhea stops in 3 days, and he's got, 9 pills still left to make you feel good. So he's going to take those other 9 pills because he's a kid from the country. And now all of a sudden, he can't poop. He's got a problem. He goes to the doctor. He says, you took all them pills, didn't you? Oh, no, I didn't. No, sir, I'm just constipated. Okay, I'm going to give you blue mass, calomel, which is mercury sulfate. Mercury, as you know, is highly toxic. They didn't know that then. All right, you've got the blue mass, and you take a few doses of that, and your bowels open up, and you're fine, and you're thinking, wow, I sure would like some more of them pills that make me feel good. I'm going to go down and tell him I've got diarrhea again. He goes down, gets 12 more pills. 12 days later, he's all bound up, and he goes to the doctor. The doctor says, you took all 12 of them pills? No, sir, I did not. I'm just bound up again. I don't know what it is. All right, I'm going to give you blue mass again. Now you've got, first dose was 30% mercury. So you now have 60% mercury in your bloodstream. And you're probably getting headaches and don't know why. And you may or may not go to the doctor for that. We'll give you probably quinine.
Did you say quinine?
Quinine, like you get for malaria. They gave it for headaches. There were things they gave for headaches I don't even want to discuss. But anyhow, you're bound up again. What is he going to do? He's going to give you blue mass. You're going to take it, and in a day or two, you're going to be dead because you're 90% mercury in your blood. And the books say that dysentery killed 90% of your casualties. I say we prescribe them to death. I have no doubt that's what's doing it. It's just sense. Makes sense. Now, 90% of them are amputations. You missed it at 2 o'clock. This is a Treffin set. Believe it or not, the Treffin was available in Roman times. They found skulls with these nice little circular holes in them. But your doctor would have gone ahead and cut a circular hole into your skull after opening up the flesh. They would have cut out a little nickel-sized piece of bone. If you didn't feel that was quite enough room, you'd take a hacksaw and go ahead and cut in a little bit more room to get in there. And he's going to try and release as much pressure, as much fluid off your skull as he can. He's going to be mopping it up and getting it, probably using one of these sponges stuffed in there for a while, and sit there a while. The whole time you're under the influence of chloroform, you're going to wake up every now and then. They're going to give you more. It's as simple as that. If you have a high metabolism, you're going to probably wake up during surgery. They had no way of knowing how much to give. They could give 2 or 3 drops to start you off and see if you're out. Anyhow, once he's relieved the pressure, he's going to go ahead, drill some holes around. He's going to take some of this wire, and that's what he's going to sew that bone back onto your skull with that he took off.
Oh, so they take that, they take the bone. So is this like a whole saw?
This is like
I mean, like it would take out the bone and you'd have a little like coin, and then they'd sew that back in to patch it back up.
Wow,
crazy.
Jeez.
That's a strong needle, right? I mean, to go through bone. I mean, how do you?
Well, you're drilling little holes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're wiring it back on.
You're going to take
basically.
either this brush or that one and brush any of the fragments away from the brain, and you're going to close the guy back up, sew him shut. Now, if you're in a federal hospital, they would sew you shut for whatever wound it's silk thread for China. With the blockade, the South was not so lucky they couldn't do that. So what they used to replace it is strong cord horsehair from the mane or the tails of horses. Horsehair is very brittle and very not particularly supple the way a silk thread would be. So what they would do is they'd keep a little fire going near the hospital, and they would be boiling water and throw horsehair in there. They knew nothing about germs then. They didn't learn about germs until Lister discovered them in London in 1870, well after the war. They thought they had ill humors in their body. Anyhow, they're hoping that'll come out. Oh, no problem. Anyhow, they would sew you up with this boiled horsehair if you were in a Confederate camp, and they've boiled all the germs out of that horsehair. If you were in a Yankee camp, any germs that was on that silk in China is still sitting on that silk now.
So why would they boil it? If it obviously
to make it soft.
Oh, to make it more easier to use.
You ever try to eat
spaghetti right out of the box?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A horsehair brush. Have you ever seen how stiff that is? Well, they boil it to soften it up like thread. So your survival rate was considerably higher in the southern camp because of the fact you're using sterilized thread. The North is using stuff that has the same germs that came from China. Still want it.
Jeez.
Yeah. So once you've got that, you sew the head shut, and you've got a lovely part in your hair for the rest of your days. And some really nice metal they never take out, the metallic thread.
So what's the 160th anniversary to the Battle of Gettysburg without ice cream? That's right, ice cream, you scream, we all scream for Mr. G's line was too long. We scream for Half Pint Creamery, which is located right off the Biglerville Road. Now, the only ice cream place I know of in town that has lactose intolerant ice cream, which is great. So let's go check out Half Pint Creamery. Half Pint Creamery has been open since 2014 when they opened their first shop in McSherrystown and has since expanded to Gettysburg. They offer homemade ice cream, including lactose-free ice cream. To learn more about Half Pint, make sure to watch tomorrow's very special episode of Food Travels 160th anniversary episode over at P&D Studios YouTube page. Links will be in the About section below. It is the end of July the 2nd, 1863, and July the 3rd is just right around the corner. The citizens of Gettysburg will not know what is coming their direction. This is George here for Weekend Travels. Happy travels, and until next time.